Meeting the diverse training needs of multiple generations starts with a common foundation: listening.
Ask what your employees want, and then do your best to deliver what you can when you can, and communicate why. Hey, if they want X and you can deliver some of X right now, but you can't deliver all of X, you can communicate, hey, we can give you X.1 this year and we can finish off X.2 next year. Or lay out the roadmap. Help them see, okay, I'm listening to you. I hear what you're saying. And I think regardless of generation, that leads to people feeling heard, they feel listened to, and they feel appreciated, which not only strengthens the relationship, but when it does come time to deliver on that learning, I think they're much more engaged.
That's Steve Goble, Chief People Builder at the Goble Group. Steve joins Da Vinci's Jenny Fadulo and me with advice on reaching learners across the generations. Next on Powered by Learning.
Powered by Learning is brought to you by Da Vinci Interactive. Da Vinci's approach to learning is grounded in 30 years of innovation and expertise. We use proven strategies and leading technology to develop solutions that empower learners to improve quality and boost performance. Learn more at davinci.com.
Today I'm joined by Jenny Fadulo, Da Vinci Learning Experience Director, and our guest, Steve Goble of the Goble Group. And we're going to talk about how best to deliver the best learning experiences by understanding how different generations want to learn. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve. Good to see you.
Hi, Jenny. Hi, Susan. Great to see you. Thank you for the opportunity and the invitation to join the Powered by Learning podcast here with Da Vinci. I greatly appreciate it and looking forward to sharing this morning.
Well, thanks, Steve. We appreciate that. And just start out by giving our listeners a little bit about your background.
Sure. I'm the owner and chief people builder at the Goble Group. I serve small independent businesses and larger teams across central Pennsylvania with learning and development, executive coaching, and a little bit of training. My business will turn 14 years old here in 2025. I'm a certified Trust Edge partner with the Trust Edge Leadership Institute. I'm a founding partner of the Maxwell Leadership Certified team. And in 2017, I was a Central Penn Business 40 Under 40 recipient. So I've been enjoying serving people and focusing on that aspect because I truly believe that the people in the organization are the only competitive advantage that organizations have these days.
So true. So true. Steve, what a phenomenal background. I know we connected, was it last month at a Central PA ATD event, and we got to talking and thought, hey, let's connect on a podcast. So here we are, really talking about generational, differences and bridging that gap through learning and leading kind of together, kind of, meshing the two. Can you, to start off, can you paint the picture, remind our viewers, what does a multi-generational workforce look like today? What are those generations we're dealing with, and what do they each one of them bring?
No, absolutely. Because in most organizations, there's anywhere from 4 to 6 different generations still active in the workplace. And when I say active, they're not just there by name only. They're very intentional about what they're doing. They have certain specific roles. At the older generation is the traditionalists or the silent generation. These are legacy individuals that are focused on loyalty. They've been with the company 35, 40, 50 years even, maybe still some of the founders. So they come with, an advisory aspect. They're very close to retirement, but they're not quite there yet, only because they don't want to, because they love what they're doing.
Right.
Then you have baby boomers. At the time, the largest number of employees age range in the workforce, hard work, experience. They grew up with that face-to-face collaboration and the in the room, get it done kind of mindset. Then you have Gen Xers, and that's where I proudly lie as a Gen Xer.
Me too.
Yes, there we go. Absolutely. We're taking over the world right now. It's our turn. It's finally our turn.
Yes.
We're independent. We're adaptable. We grew up in a time where it was, sink or swim, just kind of threw us into the water and figured out. And we did for better or worse. We really just figured it out. But we're on the cusp of that technological advancement. We grew up with computers. We grew up with video games, whereas the baby boomers didn't. And then after us come, the millennials or Gen Y, and they took that technological aspect and just kept going with it. Very collaborative in their mindset, tech driven, but they're starting to shift away from the 45, 50 hours a week in the office where the flexibility to get their job done. They care about getting the job done,
Mm-hmm.
but how they get the job done isn't as detailed or as intentionally, location wise in the office, so to speak. And then you have Gen Z and Gen Alpha. There's not much of a differentiator yet that we're seeing in the marketplace, simply because there's not a lot of Gen Alpha, but they're sharing a lot of the Gen Z traits. Again, they've taken technology and just advanced it even further.
Oh, yeah.
They got cell phones when they were 5, 6, 7 years old sometimes. And for better or for worse, we're not going to get into that conversation. But they're much more adaptable and eager to try new technologies. And they see the value of technology and what it can do in the workplace. So there's kind of just, a very broad generalization of the various generations. And they each bring their own separate abilities and intrigue to the environment within our workforces. But helping them understand and collaborate is where a lot of opportunity still lies to get the most value out of each of them as individuals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know your work focuses on really solving organizational people problems across generations. What are the most common challenges you're seeing, and how do you help teams, overcome that?
The first biggest challenge is the lack of intentional relationship building and the stereotypes around these generations. Now, some of the stereotypes are true, sure, but because we're all uniquely individually made, we have, traits of both, especially I think Gen Xers and millennials kind of, we fit as a bridge between several generations, but we don't, we as organizations, they aren't intentional about building those relationships. Is one of the biggest problems. And there's two big excuses as to why they don't do that. One is the excuse of we're too busy. We're too busy to do this. We're too busy doing that. So we get that mindset of focusing on the task got to get done. This has to be done. This has to be done. And but we're doing the wrong thing sometimes instead of building those relationships. Another excuse I see is that we've always done it this way. That's the excuse that if you talk with the Gen Alphas, you talk with the Gen Zs, you talk with millennials, even Gen Xers, right? The idea that we've always done it this way is incredibly frustrating because so much has changed in the last 5, 10, 30 years of technology.
Mm-hmm.
And that excuse of we've always done it this way does not work anymore because of the technology that is changing so fast and so rapidly. We have to be able to adjust as leaders, as individuals, and as teams.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, this just comes down to the biggest challenge is ego. And I read it somewhere in a book. I love to read. I read it somewhere in a book. Ego, the acrostic is everyone's greatest obstacle. Now, we all have egos. Egos can be good. There's no doubt about it. We all have egos. I have an ego, but we cannot let our own egos get in the way of the goals and the vision and the success we're looking for within organizations, but also at the individual level.
I love it. I'm writing down everyone's greatest obstacle. There's so much to just talk about with that, right? It's so intriguing. Yeah.
I wish I remember where I read that. I wish I remember so I can give credit where credit's due. I didn't come up with that, so I can't take credit for that. But I don't remember. But it's something that it resonates because that crosses the age demographic, right? That crosses throughout all the generations,
Yeah,
and sometimes we're our own worst enemies.
indeed. So, in your experience, how can organizations design training programs that are going to resonate with learning preferences across the multi-generational workforce? I know for us at Da Vinci, we really take a research-based approach to designing training programs. We rely heavily on Gagne's 9 events of instruction. Particularly, there's 3 of the 9: gaining attention, stimulate recall of prior knowledge, and active learning strategies, and really focus on those based on our audience. Like, for example, millennials and Gen Z's active learning, you've got to have that hands-on interactive, the way you gain attention for a millennial is going to be a little bit different than how you might grab attention for a Gen Z. So we really think about that when we're designing the programs and really aim to create the personalized feel and make it impactful for everyone. What are your thoughts?
The first thing organizations have to do is ask what their employees want. And when they tell you they don't want any training, because that's what they're going to do, they don't think they want any training, they don't think they need any training, you have to ask them again. Because what we need to understand, and I think the younger generation does get this, is that because they see the technology changing so quickly around them, They know they need to keep up, but they're not being afforded the opportunities to keep up because the generations that, the boomers and even some Gen Xers and certainly traditionalists aren't keeping up with them. So, ask what your team wants, because if they don't, if you're trying to deliver something they don't want, you're not going to get that buy-in, no matter how good it is, no matter how good the information is, no matter how well structured it is. And we also need to stop assuming that a one size fits all approach.
So, how do you avoid generalizing? Like, I don't really identify with some of the generational characteristics that my group is. But so, if you're in charge of training in your organization, if you have a small workforce, you might be able to do it. But if you've got a larger workforce, how do you know that you're really meeting the learner where they need to be, especially if not everybody fits into these tidy buckets of generational characteristics?
You have to diversify your options and the opportunities. And that's easier said than done, especially with large organizations when I know resources are limited, time is limited. But again, I think it really goes back to first ask, ask what your employees want, and then do your best to deliver what you can when you can, and communicate why. Hey, if they want X and you can deliver some of X right now, but you can't deliver all of X, I think having that relationship intact, if it's sound to begin with, you can communicate, hey, we can give you X.1 this year, and we can finish off X.2 next year, or lay out the roadmap, help them see, okay, I'm listening to you. I hear what you're saying, but just from a resource standpoint that we have right now as an organization, we can't do all of that, but here's the roadmap. We'll lay it out. And I think regardless of generation, that leads to people feeling heard. They feel listened to, and they feel appreciated, which not only strengthens the relationship, but when it does come time to deliver on that learning, I think they're much more engaged.
Yeah, I agree. And I know at Da Vinci, the way we often approach it is through we do personas. We create personas and then the learning paths. Learning paths are so effective
Yes.
when you have multiple levels there where they can kind of choose the level that's going to align and give them the personalized experience that they need.
And they want that personalized experience as well,
Right.
because they don't see themselves as the stereotypical
Right.
Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, whatever we're calling them, right?
Yep.
And that makes a huge difference, not only in their ability to maintain the knowledge we're trying to teach them on, it helps to strengthen that relationship internally, which lowers HR costs, which increases retention, and so many other added value benefits for the organization.
Well, I think you've both hit on something that's so important, and that's just listening to your workforce, and not only about what kind of training they like and the modality that they'd like, but just to kind of keep in touch with them as the training is rolled out to make sure that you're continuing to listen and evolve the training.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, man, I have a program that I do called 5 L's of leadership. And the first L is listening. Because if you don't listen, you're not going to keep people regardless.
So, with your expertise in change management, how do you advise teams to adapt to emerging technologies? AI, right? Let's talk AI. So, while addressing generational differences, I know for us at Da Vinci, we're not only designing learning solutions but trying to foster the buy-in and adaptability against across the generation. So, you look at, a traditionalist or a baby boomer, in particular, they need to know the why, right? Where
Right.
a Gen X needs more pragmatic application, where then you move on to the millennials and Gen Zs, and they're already embracing AI, right? Make them the advocates and the mentors really driving that grassroots adoption. So really for us aligning the implementation strategy with their generational strengths is really going to help bridge that gap. What are your thoughts?
I agree. There's definitely a huge gap of understanding and adoption early on.
Hmm.
But we have to be willing to try new things. The same thing is going to happen as technology continues to evolve around AI, around the blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And there's a lot of public media talk about cryptocurrencies, but the reality is the beauty of cryptocurrencies is the blockchain behind them. And that doesn't get talked about enough. And I'm not knowledgeable enough to talk about it, other than that it's cool. I'm exploring it and I'm learning. But that's the extent of my knowledge. Do not listen to me on understanding it. But I think at the same time, as part of this new stuff, we have to be willing to fail as part of the learning process. And we need to give that permission to our teams. Hey, we're trying something new. We're learning something new. It's okay to fail here
Mm-hmm.
as long as we learn something in that failure, and give guide rails to work within versus strict rules. Now, obviously, that specific advice, guide rails versus strict rules, is going to be dependent on industry or any regulatory stuff. I know, in the banking world, they don't really have guide rails. They have more strict rules, or even some of the healthcare world, they have kind of strict rules. And I understand that. But the reality is we still have to be willing to try new things without fear of being punished for failing.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the learning process. Nobody got it right the first time. I mean, we think about when my daughter just turned 14 a month ago, my son's 11. But if you're a parent out there, think about when your child first learned to walk. We have to let them fail. It's painful to fail sometimes. They fell, they got bruised, they got bloodied maybe, started crying. But as a dad, I'm really glad I'm not carrying around a 14-year-old kid, because we have to let them fail and learn from that experience, right? And that's hard to do sometimes because of the pain we go through it.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't go through the pain, we're never really going to learn and get the most ability out of it.
Yeah. So, what role does leadership play in connecting generational strengths to create, what they need to get things done, to create that cohesive and productive team?
Well, leaders have the responsibility to go first. They have the titles, the positional authority. And, just because you have a title or positional authority doesn't make you a leader. I want to make sure that is clear to talk on leadership. But you have that positional authority, have that title. You have to be the initiator. You have to do it with intentionality. And you have to understand and identify the strengths of each members of your team, because knowing the strengths of your team is really important to relationship building, to success. And you have to be okay with the teams changing more frequently than the past. Baby boomers stuck with the job 35, 40 years. They didn't like the boss. They sucked it up, for lack of better words, right? And just dealt with it. Baby boomers a little more aggressive, in your face kind of ways. Gen Xers, we're all whatever. We'll do our own thing. We'll just pretend we're listening to you and ignore you anyway and do our own thing. And that's how some of the generations are. But we have to be okay with teams changing more frequently. And I'm a sports fan. I grew up. I played D1 lacrosse in college, and I enjoy sports. Watching them now, I'm too old to play them anymore. But we have to be okay with the transition that the teams make to make sure that we're building the strongest team possible. And that requires us to continue learning about the technology, learning about each other as individuals, and understanding the needs and desires within the age of members of your team, of how they determine what success is. Success is defined differently by these generations coming up now than it was by the traditionalists, by the baby boomers. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we just have to understand the why behind it.
Agreed. I'm glad you said that about the strengths. I've always been interested in focusing on strengths. I know any new team member that joins my team, I always have them do a profile. I can't remember the author. I'm going to have to look it up. Wrote a book, Now Discover Your Strengths. And there's like a,
Marcus Buckingham.
thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
You win the prize.
You do win the prize. It was killing me. Yeah.
There's two authors. It was Marcus and somebody else. I'm a huge fan of
Yeah.
Buckingham's work because he's done the research, right?
Yep.
And he's written several other great books beyond. But it does start with our strengths. Think about what we enjoy doing as individuals.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more fun working from our strengths versus working from our weaknesses.
Yep.
Now, and we can delegate to somebody else on our team, because what our strengths are might be different than somebody else's strengths, and what their strengths are might be our weaknesses.
Agreed.
And it doesn't mean better or worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just means that we're all different.
Right.
And understanding that is okay.
Yep.
Going back to the sports analogy, football, right? It's football season right now, and both the Steelers and the Eagles are doing well. We're located in PA, so let's talk about them for a minute. So, I mean, you have the quarterback, you have the lineman, you have the running back, you have the wide receivers on offense, and they all have their role to play. And, the quarterback makes the most money usually, but they are, running the team, right? But if they have a terrible offensive line in front of them, no matter how good they are, they'll never reach their potential because the rest of the team around them isn't as strong. And that's the same true in business. Yeah, there's going to be leaders of the team or the face of the team or those that have that position, authority, and title, but they need a great support team around them to truly to truly get the best experience, not only results wise for the organization, but also cohesiveness and structure and relationship building on the team.
Yeah. To talk about that book a little bit more, the thing that got me the buy-in on that book was the analogy with Dan Marino. So the listeners, if you're not listening, Dan Marino was a Hall of Fame quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. And it said, thank goodness his coaches didn't focus on his weaknesses.
Mhm.
Oh, you need to be a better running back. You need to do this. You need to be a better blocker. No, let's keep building your strength as a quarterback and what you're doing well, right? So that was my buy-in on that book, that analogy and that story. I'm like, absolutely. Let's figure out what each person can bring and really go with it.
Yeah, and then find complementary players who have their own
Mhm.
strengths
Yeah.
that amplify the success of the team.
Yep. All right. Well, this was a lot of fun, but we do need to probably wrap it up. Any parting thoughts? What advice would you give for a listener who's faced with leading and training a multi-generational workforce?
One thing I talk about with clients and teams, individuals, is once you're done learning, you're done. Whether that's learning about people, whether it's learning about business skills, whether it's learning about generations, AI, technology, once you're done learning, you're done. So never stop learning. Always be open to understanding, to ask questions, share insights, share this podcast, share other podcasts, share books. But once you're done learning, you're done.
Yeah. That's an amazing piece of advice. I agree. You should.
Yeah.
That's what keeps us going, right? Is you always should embrace new opportunities and new experiences and learn from them. This has been a lot of fun. Thank
We are done. We are done with this podcast interview, but not done learning and not
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
not done talking with you, Steve. We appreciate you taking the time to chat with Jenny and me today, and we look forward to sharing this with our listeners.
Now, again, I thank you for the opportunity to join you here on the Powered by Learning podcast. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to connecting again in the future as well.
Jenny, Steve had some good advice on focusing on the learner before developing training.
Yeah, I completely agree, Susan. He shared so many valuable insights, and what really stood out to me was his focus on listening and intentionality, which really aligns well with how we approach learning solutions here at DaVinci. I mean, whether it's designing training for multi-generational teams or creating personalized learning paths, it all starts with understanding the unique needs of the learner.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jenny.
You're welcome.
And special thanks to our guest, Steve Goble of the Goble Group. If you have an idea for a topic or a guest, please reach out to us at poweredbylearning@davinci.com. And don't forget that you can subscribe to Powered by Learning wherever you listen to your podcasts.